Okay, well, with the development of the higher symmetry point groups like 2mm, 4mm, 6mm, and 3m, that means that we are now ready to finally develop all of the 2D space groups, and space groups are just nomenclature for taking our point groups and now putting them into the lattices. Now remember, we've already done a filtering of lattices. We could have done all these point groups and then inserted them into random lattices and discovered the translation stuff later, but that's kind of complicated. It made sense to look at the rotations that were allowed from the combination rotation and translation vectors, because we know we're going to be working with crystals, and so it made sense to, hey, let's limit the number of lattices compatible with rotation first anyway. Then go back and develop missing point groups that could be existing from higher symmetries. And now we're going to go put them into that lattice and see first if they're compatible, or we're going to, kind of pick choices so they are compatible. And then look for higher order symmetry elements that we missed in the group. Because remember, just like we did with the point group, if I put two elements together, there's like a third one sitting around in the group possibly, and so therefore we want to do a similar thing here. So let's talk about our strategy in a little more detail. So we have 5 lattices, like I said, that are compatible with the translation of rotations. And now we have 10 point groups. In case you haven't gone back and reviewed, there's the very primitive 1, then there's two-fold axis, 3-fold axis, 4-fold axis, and 6-fold axis. That is a point group. We didn't call them that when we first started because it was easy to just talk about rotating things around a point, but that is a point group. And then of course we eventually showed that the mirror plane could be added. And then we said, aha, I can add these rotations and the mirror plane in a point group without thinking about lattices now, and develop higher symmetries about a point. And we just developed a 2mm, the 3m, the 4mm, and the 6mm. So 5 lattices and 10 point groups. So it's going to turn out that there are 17 unique 2D space groups that we derive from this. And to most of you, that's probably not obvious why it's 17. As you can think of us knowing the 17 is, well, of course, after you develop them, we can tell you how many there are. So strategy is to get at these 17, we're going to insert the point groups and generally put motifs representing the point group into the compatible lattices and see what kind of patterns evolve. And remember, the pattern, this inspection stuff combined with the existing combination theorems will allow us to pick out symmetries that are there that we didn't notice initially. And also there's going to be some cases where we definitely identify new operations. I mean, not new combination theorems, as the number of operations are already mentioned. Until we go to 3D, we can't get an inversion. So we have our operational set already picked, but we can find out the relationships between them, like I was saying, if we notice new things. But another thing we're going to do, and this is a little bit of a cheat, but we're going to see that there's combination of 2 operations which don't really produce a unique new operation, but we're going to define a set of 2 other symmetry elements just because it's convenient to think about when we look at the patterns. Okay, so again, it's a little bit more detailed, a little bit more complex, but basically just sticking the motifs into the lattice now from these different point groups, looking for any new operations and combination theorems, and then sometimes defining couplets of operations only because that combined operation shows something in a pattern that's fairly easy to see. So the order that we're going to do in developing this is start from simple to complex, of course. So we're going to start with the primitive lattices that we've developed, and we're going to just add the rotation point groups and that we know are compatible because that's how we derived the primitive lattice in the first place, right? Those lattices. Then we will add the mirror plane, and that will create what's called some centered lattices. Sorry, we already created centered lattice, but it will, the mirror plane creates unique crystallographic groups when combined with both the primitive lattice and the centered lattice, right? The primitive lattice with higher symmetry point groups is taking the primitive lattice and then adding 2mm, 4mm, etc. And then I just want to finish with showing you combinations that we didn't explicitly do because they didn't show up, but it makes sense that at the end, when we have some of these combination operations and we have some new combination theorems, you can go back and say, aha, what about this? We could combine this with, a twofold axis. So we even tried that. And so what we're going to show you is why those didn't produce, if you did do them, they don't produce unique, new different crystallographic space groups. It's going to be important in naming these to understand the nomenclature. So the first symbol that we put denotes the primitive or centered lattice, and most of them are primitive except for the centered rectangular that we had, right? And it tells you whether it's 2D or 3D space group. The way they do this is that P symbolizes primitive lattice, and the fact that it's a small case, lowercase, symbolizes that it's 2D. So if it's a big P, then it's 3D. If it starts off with a C, it's because it's a centered lattice that we're throwing things into. And the second part denotes the point group that we insert. So for example, if we were to put in, if we thought that it's going to define a new lattice, a small p followed by 2mm would be the insertion of the 2mm point group into the primitive lattice. And that is the outline of our strategy for finishing the 2D crystallographic space groups.